Lisa Morgan spent the night reading through 15 mission reports and watching surveillance footage of failed dragon encounters. Each report told the same story. Hunters would approach the mountain nests with heavy weapons and capture equipment. The dragons would attack immediately with devastating force. What interested Lisa most were the small details that the military minds had overlooked. In every encounter, the dragons gave warnings first. They would circle overhead, making loud calls. Before attacking, they would create small lightning displays as if trying to communicate. Only when the hunters continued advancing would the dragons unleash their full fury. "They are trying to tell you something," Lisa murmured as she watched footage of a golden, scaled dragon hovering over a Vorth hunting party. The dragon called out 3 times in a complex pattern of sounds before finally attacking. She also noticed that the dragons never pursued fleeing hunters very far. Once the threat moved away, from the nesting areas, the dragons would return to their territories. This was not the behavior of mindless beasts, but of intelligent creatures defending their homes. At dawn, Lisa prepared for her journey into the mountains. She packed light with only basic camping supplies and food for several days. The watching. Keth soldiers could not believe she carried no weapons or protective armor. Captain Vex 7 approached her as she checked her pack one final time. His injured arm was healing, but he still moved carefully. "Human," he said quietly. "Those creatures killed half my team yesterday. They move faster than our sensors can track, and their lightning can melt through battle armor in seconds." Lisa looked up at the scarred Keth warrior. "Thank you for the warning, Captain. Can you tell me exactly what happened when you first encountered them?" Vex 7 thought for a moment. "We were advancing on the main nesting site when the largest dragon appeared above us. It made loud sounds, like it was angry. Our commander ordered us to fire tranquilizer rounds, but they bounced off its scales." "What kind of sounds?" Lisa asked with interest. "Roaring mostly, but also some higher-pitched calls. Almost like it was trying to speak." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "And then what happened?" "It called out 2 more times, and then attacked. The lightning came from everywhere at once. My team never had a chance." "Thank you, Captain," Lisa said sincerely. "That information may be very helpful." Commander Zeth 9 arrived to see her off. He had spent the night wondering if he should stop this obvious suicide mission. But orders from Admiral Clax Prime were clear. If the human failed, then orbital bombardment would begin within 48 hours. "Lisa Morgan," he said formally, "are you certain you wish to proceed with this plan?" "As certain as anyone can be when trying something completely new," she replied with that same calm smile. "Commander, may I ask why dragon scales are so important to your empire?" The question surprised him. They contain quantum crystalline structures that can store and channel enormous amounts of energy. One dragon scale can power a starship for decades. And how many dragons would you need to harvest to power your new fleet? Zeth 9 calculated quickly. "Perhaps 50 adult dragons would provide enough scales for our immediate needs." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. "That would likely mean the extinction of the species on this world. That is an acceptable cost for the advancement of the Empire," he replied, though something in her tone made him uncomfortable. "I see," Lisa said softly. "Well, then I suppose I should get started." She walked toward the mountain trail that led to the dragon territories. The morning sun cast her shadow far ahead, as if pointing the way to her destination. The Keth soldiers watched through their scopes as she began climbing the rocky path. Many placed bets on how long she would survive. The most optimistic gave her 20 minutes. But Lisa moved with patience and care. She stopped frequently to rest and observe her surroundings. She seemed to be studying the landscape itself as much as watching for dragons. 3 hours into her journey, she found what she was looking for. A wide meadow about halfway up the mountain with clear sight lines in all directions. It was far enough from the main nesting sites to avoid immediate attack, but close enough that curious dragons might investigate. Lisa set up a simple camp in the center of the meadow. She built no walls or defenses. Instead, she arranged her belongings in a pattern that would be clearly visible from above. Then she sat down and began to eat lunch. Back at the base, Commander Zeth 9 stared at his view screen in confusion. "What is she doing?" "It appears she is having a picnic, sir," his communications officer replied. In dragon territory. Yes, sir. Hours passed. Lisa sat peacefully in her meadow, eating and reading from a small book. She showed no signs of fear or urgency. To the watching aliens, she looked like a tourist on vacation. Then something appeared on the horizon. It started as a dark speck against the cloudy sky. The base sensors immediately identified it as a storm dragon moving at high speed toward Lisa. Position. Should we prepare the rescue team, sir? Captain Vex 7 asked. Ready them, but do not deploy, Zeth 9 ordered. Let us see what happens. The dragon was massive with scales that shifted from deep blue to silver as it moved through the air. Lightning danced around its wings in complex patterns. This was clearly one of the apex predators that had terrorized hunting parties for months. It circled Lisa Meadow 3 times, making the same loud calls that previous hunting parties had heard. But instead of raising weapons or calling for backup, Lisa simply looked up and waved. The dragon landed about 50 meters away from her with enough force to shake the ground. Its eyes were the size of dinner plates and glowed with inner fire. Steam rose from its nostrils as it studied the small figure sitting calmly in the grass. Lisa closed her book and stood up slowly. She made no sudden movements and kept her hands visible. Then she did something that no dragon hunter had ever attempted. She bowed. It was a formal, respectful bow that acknowledged the dragon's power and position. She held the position for several seconds before straightening up with that same calm smile. Hello, there, she said in a clear voice that carried across the meadow. My name is Lisa. You have a beautiful home. The dragon tilted its massive head as if trying to understand her words. It made a low, rumbling sound that was almost questioning. Lisa reached into her pack and pulled out a piece of food. She held it up so the dragon could see it clearly, then placed it on the ground about halfway between them. I brought some food to share, she said conversationally. I hope you do not mind the intrusion, but I was hoping we could talk. The dragon stared at the offered food for a long moment. Its tail swished nervously and small sparks danced between its claws. Every instinct probably told it to attack this strange intruder. But something about Lisa's calm manner seemed to confuse its aggressive impulses. Very slowly, the great dragon stepped forward. Its movement was surprisingly graceful for something so large. It lowered its massive head toward the food while keeping its eyes fixed on Lisa. With careful precision, it picked up the offered meal with the very tip of its snout. The food disappeared in one small bite that was barely noticeable. Given the creature's size, Lisa smiled and applauded softly. Thank you for trusting me, she said. That took courage. The dragon made another rumbling sound. This time it seemed less threatening and more curious. At the base camp, every alien soldier watched in stunned silence as the human continued her impossible conversation with one of the most feared predators in known space. The morning sun cast long shadows across the military base on planet Dracos as Commander Zeth 9 received the worst news of his career. Another hunting team had failed to capture even one storm dragon. This made it the 15th failed mission in 3 months. The Keth Empire had sent their best warriors to this distant world. These were not ordinary soldiers, but elite dragon hunters trained from birth to capture the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Each hunter carried weapons worth more than entire planets, and wore armor that could withstand the heat of a dying star. Yet the storm dragons of Dracos had defeated them all. Commander Zeth 9 stood on his command deck watching the latest team return through the transport beam. Half of them were missing. The others bore burn marks across their silver armor, and their weapons were melted slag. Captain Vex 7 limped forward and saluted weakly. His left arm hung useless at his side, and his face showed the haunted look of someone who had seen death up close. Report, Zeth 9 commanded, though he already knew what he would hear. The dragons knew we were coming, sir, Vex 7 said in a hoarse voice. They set traps, used the storms against us. We never even got close to the nesting grounds. Zeth 9 clicked his mandibles in frustration. The Keth Empire ruled over 200 star systems. Their military had conquered races that other species considered invincible, yet these creatures on this backwater planet were making them look like amateurs. The storm dragons were unlike anything in the known galaxy. They were massive beasts the size of small buildings with scales that shifted color like living metal. Lightning danced around their wings, and they could summon thunder from clear skies. But most importantly, their scales contained a rare mineral that could power faster than light travel for decades. Every major empire wanted those scales. The Vorth Syndicate had lost 30 of their best soldiers trying to capture one dragon. The Crystalline Collective sent their finest hunting robots and watched them get torn apart in minutes. Even the Shadow Guild had retreated after a single encounter. Now it was the Keth Empire turn to fail. "Sir," came a voice from the communication station. "We have an incoming transmission from the orbital defense grid." Zeth-9 turned toward the main screen. The image of Admiral Klax Prime appeared with his cold black eyes and scarred face. "Commander," the Admiral said without greeting, "I am told your latest mission was another failure." "Yes, sir," Zeth-9 replied, trying to keep the shame out of his voice. "The dragon seemed to anticipate our every move. Perhaps because you are using the same tactics that have failed for everyone else." Admiral Klax Prime leaned forward. "The High Command is growing impatient. We need those dragon scales to complete the new fleet." "I understand, sir, but these creatures are more intelligent than we initially thought." "Intelligence means nothing against superior firepower," the Admiral snapped. "I am sending you additional resources, orbital bombardment cannons and atmospheric processors. If you cannot capture the dragons alive, then we will take what we need from their corpses." The transmission ended, leaving Zeth-9 staring at a blank screen. Orbital bombardment would destroy the entire ecosystem of Dracos. It would also likely damage the very scales they were trying to harvest. But orders were orders in the Keth Empire. As he prepared for what might be the final assault on the dragon nests, a junior officer approached his station. "Sir," the young Keth said nervously, "we have received a landing request from a human transport vessel." Zeth-9 looked at the data pad. One small ship with minimal weapons and a crew of exactly one person. Humans were considered the weakest species in known space. They had only recently achieved faster than light travel, and their military was laughable compared to the great empires. "What does a human want on Dracos?" he wondered aloud. "The pilot says she heard about our dragon problem and wants to help," the officer reported. Several Keth officers burst into their equivalent of laughter. The sound was like metal grinding against stone. "A human wants to help us capture storm dragons," Captain Vex 7 said through his pain. "Perhaps she has not heard that we are the greatest hunters in 7 galaxies." But something about the request intrigued Zeth-9. Perhaps it was desperation, or perhaps it was curiosity about what foolish plan the human might have. Grant landing. Permission, he decided. We could use some entertainment before we begin the bombardment. An hour later, the small human ship touched down on the landing pad near the base camp. From it emerged a figure that caused every alien present to stop and stare. She appeared human, but with subtle differences that marked her as something more. Her ears were slightly pointed, and her eyes held an unusual blue glow. She was tall and moved with a fluid grace that spoke of hidden strength. Her clothing was simple brown leather that looked handmade rather than manufactured. Most surprisingly, she carried no visible weapons, no plasma rifles or energy swords or particle cannons. Just a small traveling pack slung over one shoulder. She walked toward the command center with confident steps while dozens of armed Keth warriors watched her approach. When she reached the main entrance, she paused and looked directly at the security. "Cameras." "Hello there," she said in perfect galactic standard. "My name is Lisa Morgan. I am here about your dragon situation." Through the intercom system, her voice carried a strange quality that seemed to calm the tension in the room. Even the battle-hardened Keth soldiers found themselves relaxing slightly. Zeth-9 decided to meet this unusual human face-to-face. He made his way to the main entrance where she waited patiently. Up close, he could see that her blue eyes held depths that seemed older than her apparent young age. "Human," he said formally. "I am Commander Zeth-9 of the Keith Imperial Fleet. You claim you can help us with creatures that have defeated our finest hunters?" Lisa smiled, and the expression transformed her entire face. "Commander, I believe your hunters are using the wrong approach. Sometimes the direct path is not the best path. And what approach would you suggest? I would like to try talking to them, she said simply. The watching Keth officers exchanged glances of disbelief. Talk to dragons. The idea was so absurd that several began laughing again. But Lisa seemed completely serious. She looked around at the burned and battered hunting equipment scattered around the base camp. She saw the wounded soldiers and the expressions of defeat on hardened warrior faces. You have been trying to take something from them by force, she observed. Perhaps they would be more cooperative if you asked nicely instead. Commander Zeth-9 studied this strange human female. Everything about her suggested she was either completely insane or knew something that the greatest military minds in the galaxy had missed. Very well human, he decided. You may attempt your talking, but know that many skilled hunters have died trying to approach the dragon nests. Lisa nodded seriously. I understand the risk, Commander. But sometimes the greatest dangers come from our own assumptions about what we are facing. She shouldered her pack and looked toward the distant mountains where lightning constantly flickered around the highest peaks. I will leave at first light, she announced. With your permission, I would like to study your previous mission reports tonight. As she walked toward the guest quarters, Commander Zeth-9 found himself wondering if he had just signed the death warrant of the strangest human he had ever met. The first dragon Lisa encountered was clearly testing her. It circled around her position, keeping about 20 meters distance while making various sounds. Lisa remained seated in the grass, responding to each call with gentle words of her own. You are trying to figure out what I am, she said calmly as the massive creature studied her from different angles. I do not blame you for being cautious. Your people have been attacked many times recently. The dragon stopped moving and fixed its glowing eyes on her face. It made a series of short, sharp sounds that almost seemed like questions. Lisa nodded as if she understood. Yes, I am different from the others who came here. I am not carrying weapons, and I did not come with an army. I came alone because I wanted to meet you properly. She stood up slowly, keeping her movements smooth and unthreatening. The dragon tensed but did not attack. My name is Lisa Morgan, she continued. In my language, that means someone who travels beside the sea. What is your name? The dragon tilted its massive head again. It made a long, complex sound that had musical qualities despite coming from such a large creature. That is beautiful, Lisa said with genuine admiration. I am afraid I cannot pronounce it correctly, but I will try to learn. Over the next hour, Lisa and the dragon developed a strange form of communication. She would speak in Galactic Standard, and the dragon would respond, with its own language of rumbles, roars, and musical calls. Neither fully understood the other, but both seemed to recognize the attempt at peaceful contact. The dragon gradually moved closer until it was only a few meters away. Lisa could see the individual scales on its massive body and smell the ozone, scent of contained lightning. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent than the surveillance videos had shown. You are not what I expected, Lisa admitted. The military reports described you as savage beasts, but I can see intelligence in your eyes. You understand much more than they realize. The dragon made a sound that was almost like agreement. It lowered its great head until it was at Lisa level and studied her with one huge eye. Lisa reached out very slowly with one hand. The dragon watched her movement carefully but did not pull away. When her fingers touched the warm scales of its snout, she felt a slight tingle of electrical energy. Incredible, she whispered. You really can control lightning. The dragon seemed pleased by her amazement. Small sparks danced harmlessly around its claws in what looked almost like showing off, but their peaceful meeting was interrupted by movement in the sky above. Two more dragons were approaching the meadow at high speed. These were even larger than the first, with scales that gleamed gold and silver in the afternoon sun. The first dragon immediately moved to position itself between Lisa and the newcomers. It called out in urgent tones that clearly carried warning or explanation. Lisa stood still and watched as the three dragons communicated in their complex language. She could hear different tones and patterns in their calls that suggested a sophisticated form of speech. The largest of the new arrivals landed with ground-shaking force. Its golden scales were marked with scars that spoke of age and many battles. When it looked at Lisa, its eyes held the cold calculation of a supreme predator evaluating potential prey. But the first dragon continued making sounds that seemed to be defending her presence. The conversation between the dragons grew more animated, with rapid exchanges of calls and responses. Finally, the golden dragon approached Lisa directly. It moved with the confidence of absolute authority, and she realized she was likely facing the leader of this dragon community. Lisa repeated the formal bow she had given to the first dragon. She held the position even longer this time, showing maximum respect for what was clearly an elder of the species. The golden dragon studied her for several long minutes. Then it made a sound unlike anything Lisa had heard before. It was complex and layered with multiple tones woven together like a musical chord. "I wish I could understand you properly," Lisa said with genuine regret. "You are trying to tell me something important." The third dragon had silver blue scales and moved with quick, nervous energy. It seemed younger than the others, but no less dangerous. It circled around Lisa's position, making short, questioning sounds. Lisa addressed all three dragons as a group. "I know you do not understand my words completely, but perhaps you can sense my intentions. I did not come here to harm you or take anything from you. I came because I believe there might be another way to solve our problems." She gestured toward the valley below, where the alien base camp was visible in the distance. "Those soldiers down there want something from you. They want your scales because they contain energy that can power their ships, but they have been trying to take them by force." The dragons followed her gesture, and their expressions grew darker. The golden leader made a sound that was clearly angry. "Yes," Lisa said. "I know they have attacked your families and destroyed your nests. That was wrong, and I am sorry it happened." She pulled out her small pack and showed them the simple supplies inside. "I brought no weapons because I do not want to fight you. I brought food because I hoped we could share a meal like civilized beings, and I brought this." From the bottom of her pack, she withdrew a small device that looked like a simple recording unit. "This can translate languages if we work together to teach it your speech patterns. Would you be willing to try?" The three dragons looked at each other and seemed to communicate through subtle changes in posture and brief sounds. Lisa waited patiently while they reached whatever decision they were making. Finally, the golden leader approached the translation device. It made the same complex musical sound it had produced earlier. The device recorded the sound and began analyzing the audio patterns. "Thank you," Lisa said with relief. "Now I will speak the same concept in my language." She looked directly at the golden dragon. "Greetings, wise one. I am honored to meet you." The device recorded her words and began building a basic translation matrix. It would take time, but Lisa felt hopeful that real communication might be possible. As the afternoon wore on, Lisa worked with all three dragons to build a foundation for translation. They seemed to understand what she was trying to accomplish, and cooperated by repeating sounds and responding to her attempts at their language. Back at the base camp, Commander Zeth9 watched the impossible scene through his surveillance equipment. The human had been with the dragons for hours, and not only was she still alive, but she seemed to be having some kind of extended conversation with them. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Admiral Clax Prime is requesting an update on the orbital bombardment schedule." Zeth9 looked at the view screen showing Lisa surrounded by three of the most dangerous creatures in known space. They were not attacking her. In fact, they seemed to be actively helping with whatever project she was working on. "Tell the Admiral we are experiencing technical delays," he decided. "The bombardment will have to wait." As evening approached, Lisa made a decision that would have terrified any sane person. She decided to spend the night in the meadow with the dragons. "I know this is unusual," she told them through the partially functional translator, "but I would like to continue our conversation tomorrow. Would it be safe for me to sleep here?" The golden leader made a series of sounds that the translator interpreted as agreement with protective undertones. The three dragons arranged themselves in a loose circle around Lisa's position, with their heads facing outward like guards. Lisa set up her simple sleeping gear in the center of their protective formation. As darkness fell, she could see the soft glow of their scales and the occasional spark of lightning around their claws. "Thank you," she said softly. "I have never felt safer." The dragons responded with low rumbling sounds that seemed almost like lullabies. As Lisa drifted off to sleep, she was surrounded by the most feared predators in the galaxy, and they were singing her to sleep. Lisa woke at dawn to find herself surrounded by more dragons than she had expected. During the night, several others had joined the 3 she had met the previous day. Now, 8 magnificent creatures formed a protective circle around her sleeping area. The translator device had been working all night analyzing the dragons' conversations among themselves. When Lisa activated it, she found that it had made significant progress in understanding their language patterns. "Good morning, everyone," she said cheerfully. The device converted her words into a series of musical tones that caused several dragons to respond with what seemed like greetings. The Golden Leader moved closer and spoke directly to the translator. The device processed his words and produced text on its small screen. "Human friend Lisa, we have decided to trust you. But first you must understand the truth about our people." Lisa felt her heart racing with excitement. Real communication was finally possible. "I would be honored to learn about your people," she replied through the translator. The Golden Dragon began to speak, and Lisa listened with growing amazement as the device revealed the true nature of the storm dragons of Dracos. They were not simple beasts, but an ancient civilization that had once traveled among the stars. Thousands of years ago, they had possessed technology that could harness the power of lightning and storms. But a great war with an enemy they called the Shadow Devourers had forced them to abandon their cities and retreat to primitive worlds. "Like Dracos, we chose to live simply," the leader explained, "to hide our true nature so that the Shadow Devourers would not find us again. But now new enemies come seeking to harvest our scales like we are animals." Lisa felt a chill of understanding. The Shadow Devourers, are they still a threat? Several dragons made agitated sounds, and the leader response came through clearly. "They sleep in the void between galaxies, but they are not gone. If we reveal our technology again, they will sense it and return to finish what they started." So when the hunting parties attacked, you were not just defending territory, Lisa realized. You were protecting the secret of your entire civilization? "Yes. We hope to drive away the hunters without revealing our intelligence. But they keep coming in greater numbers with more powerful weapons." Lisa looked around at the assembled dragons and felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. These were not the savage beasts that the galaxy believed them to be. They were refugees from an ancient war hiding among primitive mountains to protect not just themselves, but potentially all life from a greater threat. The soldiers in the valley below plan to begin orbital bombardment soon, she said quietly. They believe you are just animals standing between them and valuable resources. The dragons exchanged rapid communications that the translator could not keep up with. Lisa could see fear and anger in their movements. "How long do we have?" the leader asked. Lisa checked her communication device. "Less than 24 hours unless I can convince them to stop." The Golden Dragon was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his words carried the weight of enormous decision. "Lisa Morgan, who travels beside the sea, will you carry a message to your people for us?" "Of course." "What message?" "Tell them we offer partnership instead of conquest. Our people can provide the energy they seek, but not by taking our scales. We can channel lightning directly into their power systems. Enough energy to fuel 1,000 fleets without harming any dragon." Lisa felt hope rising in her chest. "They would agree to such an arrangement. There are conditions," the leader continued. "We must be recognized as an intelligent species with rights to our territories. The hunting must stop immediately. And most importantly, the location of our world must be kept secret from the greater galaxy." "Why secret?" "Because if the Shadow Devourers learn that we still exist, they will return. And when they come, they will consume not just us, but every living world in their path, until the galaxy is empty and dark." Lisa understood. The dragons were not just protecting themselves, but serving as guardians against a threat that could destroy everything. "I will carry your message," she promised. But you should know that the commander down there has orders from his superiors. He may not have the authority to make such agreements. The silver-blue dragon, who had remained quiet during most of the conversation, suddenly spoke up. The translator converted his words with obvious excitement. Then we will give him something his superiors cannot ignore. A demonstration of what partnership could offer. Before Lisa could ask what he meant, the young dragon launched himself into the sky with tremendous speed. Lightning began to gather around his wings as he climbed higher and higher until he was barely visible against the morning clouds. Then the demonstration began. Lightning erupted from the dragon in controlled, precise bolts that struck predetermined targets across the mountainside. Each bolt contained more energy than the most powerful weapons in the Keth arsenal, but they were directed with surgical precision. Rocks were vaporized into perfect geometric shapes. Metal deposits in the ground were melted and reformed into complex patterns. The display continued for 10 minutes, with the dragon creating increasingly complex formations of controlled lightning. Finally, he returned to the meadow and landed with obvious pride in his achievement. "Impressive," Lisa said with genuine admiration. "That was definitely a demonstration of precision and power. Now they will understand that we are not beasts," the leader said with satisfaction. No animal could create such controlled displays of energy. Lisa hoped he was right, but she suspected that military minds might interpret the demonstration differently. To Commander Zeth 9, this might look like a threat rather than an offer of cooperation. Her communication device began beeping with an incoming message from the base camp. When she answered it, Commander Zeth 9's voice came through with obvious tension. "Lisa Morgan, what was that energy display we just witnessed?" "That was my new friends showing you what partnership might look like," she replied carefully. "Commander, I need to speak with you immediately about a proposed solution to our situation. You have been with those creatures for 2 days. Are you being held against your will?" Lisa looked around at the 8 dragons who were watching her with expressions of concern and hope. "No, Commander. I am here by choice, and I believe I have found a way to give your empire what it needs without anyone having to die." There was a long pause before Zeth 9 responded. "Very well. You will be escorted back to base for debriefing in 1 hour. I will come willingly, but I request that you delay any military action until I can present the dragon's offer formally." Another pause. "You refer to them as if they are intelligent beings, because they are Commander." Much more intelligent than we initially realized, Lisa ended the communication and turned to address the assembled dragons. Through the translator, she explained that she would return to the base camp to negotiate on their behalf. The golden leader approached her with something gleaming in his claws. It was a small scale about the size of her palm that sparkled with inner light. "Take this as proof of our sincerity," he said. "It contains enough energy to power their base for a year, but tell them it is freely given, not stolen." Lisa accepted the scale with reverence. She could feel the power contained within it, like holding a piece of captured lightning. "I will do everything I can to make them understand," she promised. As she prepared to leave the meadow, Lisa realized that the fate of 2 species now rested on her ability to convince a military commander that partnership was better than conquest. The alternative was a war that could awaken horrors that had slept for millennia. Lisa walked down the mountain path carrying more than just a dragon scale in her hands. She carried the hopes of an entire species and the responsibility of preventing a war that could awaken ancient terrors. The Keth soldiers who escorted her back to base camp stared at her with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Word had spread quickly that the strange human had not only survived 2 days with the dragons, but had somehow convinced them to create the impressive lightning display they had all witnessed. Commander Zeth 9 waited for her in the main briefing room along with his senior officers. As Lisa entered, she could see the tension in their postures. These were career soldiers who had built their reputations on conquest and dominance. The idea that negotiation might succeed where force had failed challenged everything they believed. "Lisa Morgan," Commander Zeth 9 said formally, "you will explain exactly what occurred during your time with the creatures." Lisa placed the dragon scale carefully on the conference table. Even in the artificial lighting of the base, the scale seemed to glow with inner fire. Several Keth officers leaned forward to examine it more closely. "This scale was given to me freely," Lisa began. "It contains enough energy to power your entire base for a full year. It is a gift from the Dragon Leader to demonstrate their willingness to cooperate." Captain Vex 7, who still bore scars from his encounter with the dragons, reached toward the scale, then pulled his hand back. "How do we know this is not some kind of trap?" he asked suspiciously. Lisa activated her translation device and played back several recordings of her conversations with the dragons. The complex musical language filled the room as alien voices spoke of partnership and cooperation. "These are not the sounds of mindless beasts," she explained. "The dragons of Dracos are an intelligent species with their own civilization and history. They have been hiding their true nature to protect themselves from an ancient enemy." Commander Zeth 9 listened to the recordings with growing amazement. The complexity of the dragon language was undeniable. No animal could produce such sophisticated patterns of communication. "You claim they offer partnership," he said. "What exactly are the terms?" Lisa took a deep breath and began to explain everything she had learned. She spoke of the dragons' ancient civilization and their war with the Shadow Devourers. She described their offer to provide unlimited clean energy through controlled lightning rather than harvested scales. In exchange, they ask for recognition as an intelligent species with rights to their territory, she continued. They want the hunting to stop, and they want the location of their world kept secret to prevent their ancient enemies from finding them. The room erupted in discussion as the Keth officers debated among themselves. Lisa waited patiently while they argued about the implications of treating the dragons as equals, rather than resources to be harvested. "Even if we accept this proposal," Commander Zeth 9 said finally, "I do not have the authority to make such agreements. This decision must come from Admiral Clax Prime and the High Command. Then we need to contact them immediately," Lisa urged. "The dragons will not wait indefinitely for an answer. If they believe negotiation has failed, they will defend themselves with everything they have." Commander Zeth 9 activated the communication system and requested an immediate conference with Admiral Clax Prime. When the Admiral's image appeared, on the main screen his expression was cold and impatient. "Commander, I was told you had new intelligence about the dragon situation." "Yes, sir. It appears the creatures are more than we initially believed." Zeth 9 gestured to Lisa. "This human has established communication with them and claims they offer an alternative to conquest." Admiral Clax Prime fixed his dark eyes on Lisa. "Human, you will explain this alleged offer quickly. I have prepared the orbital bombardment fleet and we launch in 6 hours." Lisa felt the weight of countless lives depending on her words. She began to speak with all the passion and conviction she could summon. "Admiral, the dragons are not animals but refugees from an ancient war. They possess technology that can provide unlimited energy without anyone dying. They offer partnership that could benefit the entire galaxy." She held up the glowing scale. "This single freely given scale contains more power than you could harvest from a dozen dead dragons. They can produce thousands of these through their lightning manipulation abilities." Admiral Clax Prime studied the scale with obvious interest. The energy readings visible on his instruments were indeed impressive. "And what do they demand in return for this alleged cooperation? Recognition as a sentient species and protection of their secret location. They fear that revealing their existence will attract enemies far worse than any current threat." The Admiral was quiet for several minutes processing this information. Lisa could see him calculating costs and benefits with the cold logic of military strategy. "Even if this offer is genuine," he said finally, "the High Command has invested enormous resources in this operation. We cannot return empty-handed." "You would not be empty-handed," Lisa insisted. "You would return with the most significant diplomatic breakthrough in galactic history. First contact with a species that possesses energy technology beyond anything currently known." Admiral Clax Prime looked at Commander Zeth 9. "What is your assessment of this situation, Commander?" "Sir, I have reviewed the evidence, and I believe the human is correct. These creatures display clear signs of intelligence and their offer of partnership appears genuine." The Admiral made his decision with the swift certainty of long command experience. "I will delay the bombardment for 24 hours, he announced. The human will arrange a formal meeting between myself and the dragon leadership. If satisfactory agreements can be reached, we will proceed with partnership. If not, the bombardment commences as scheduled. Lisa felt relief flooding through her, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead. Convincing the dragons to trust a formal meeting with the military leaders who had been hunting them would require all her diplomatic skills. "Admiral, may I suggest that the meeting take place in the meadow where I first encountered them?" she said. "Neutral ground away from both your base and their nesting sites, acceptable. You will escort me personally and guarantee my safety." Lisa nodded, though she wondered how she could guarantee anything when dealing with beings who controlled lightning itself. The next day, Lisa found herself walking back up the mountain path, accompanied by Admiral Clax Prime and a small honor guard of Keth soldiers. The Admiral had insisted on wearing full battle armor despite Lisa protests that it might be seen as aggressive. When they reached the meadow, they found 8 dragons waiting in formal arrangement. The Golden Leader stood at the center with the others forming a ceremonial pattern around him. Lisa activated her translation device and served as interpreter for the historic first meeting between the Keth Empire and the dragon civilization of Dracos. The negotiations lasted for hours, with both sides carefully working through the details of their proposed partnership. The dragons would provide controlled energy generation in exchange for recognition and protection. The Keth Empire would gain access to virtually unlimited power while avoiding a costly and destructive war. But the most significant moment came when the dragon leader revealed the true scope of the threat they had been hiding from. "The Shadow Devourers are not myth," he explained through Lisa translation. "They are ancient machines that consume all life and energy in their path. They have destroyed entire galaxies before falling into dormant cycles. Our people fled to worlds like this to avoid triggering their awakening." Admiral Clax Prime listened with growing concern as the dragon described weapons that could crack planets and fleets that darkened space itself. "If what you say is true, then your secret serves a greater purpose than just protecting your own species. Yes, every world that lives in peace exists because the Shadow Devourers sleep. We are guardians not just of our own survival, but of the continued existence of all life." The formal partnership agreements were signed that day in a meadow halfway up a mountain on a world called Dracos. Lisa Morgan became the first official dragon speaker and established protocols for cooperation between 2 very different but equally intelligent species. Years later, when young cadets studied the Dragon Accords, they always asked the same question about how one human succeeded where entire armies had failed. The answer became legend throughout the galaxy. Sometimes the greatest victories come not from taking what you want, but from offering what others need. Lisa and her dragon friends became symbols of a new age where partnership replaced conquest and understanding overcame fear. The storm dragons of Dracos no longer hid in their mountains, but worked alongside their new allies to protect the galaxy from threats too ancient and terrible for any one species to face alone. And in the deep void between galaxies, something that had slumbered for millennia stirred briefly, then settled back into dormancy, sensing that its time had not yet come.